how that was is left out with the breaching method that assigned others to communicate it for nature, otherwise that body was sensed. And that was sustained, and then America's founders were born. America's were founders, America's founders behind James Madison and his plan. And that's distinct from our founders as presidents. You could say, oh, well, presidents are founders too. Yeah, but if you can't make that distinction, we were told. See, a lot of people weren't told that. That's what we were told. See, there's roles, self-value, not just roles with, but roles with self-value, with other communicated for our founders than they communicated. And then nature, because nature is communicating, it's other than nature's communicating too. With black people's white survivors left out from the conversation will cause slavery. A human fact should be nature breaching method that had been sustained. Roles would have been sustained, otherwise that body was sensed through our own bodies. This is a method slash S hiding through the parts, A through Z, entertaining its system, tactical tear from the one A through Z. That is why and how we are a united species body of individual bodies, an individual species body of individual bodies. All group differences come with demonstration slash S of the same thing, but now it does. You can't appreciate those short words properly because it's a system tactile ulterior from our own. All exceptions, exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other come with demonstrations of the same thing. The breaching method uses that to show the distinct identities of criminal insidiousness, including identities of the law, private, formal, and other, all associated. The difference between that, the people next to them, it's next to everyone. This is a method that perfected worse than groupthink consolidation. One of the things that is distinctly sickly, non-distinctly too, though, is manifest three ways as an identity theft, fraud, slander method. Now, if you're born in the suburbs, you know the suburbs were built before America's founders were born, and they didn't have cars yet. And so these things are used to sense who's going to use what is correlation by nature's system. Because the identities of the law, the identities of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the identities of countries A through Z, shared here or there, on and off campuses, speaking about things like law. Forgiveness is because this breaching method knew they would defend their syntax. Therefore, functions by the law. Criminally foreign influence, tactically illusions, raw. That's one of the things that witch trials are about. Even they're made up. They're about that torture, extortion, slavery method that was entrenched and sickly distinctly against our founders, and sickly not distinctly against our founders and everyone else. But everyone left that out, even though it is value for everyone to discern, to easily overcome. Once we could all discern it, it has all natures of experts already being and have been a part of applications, as not just as malarkey, as criminal insidiousness slash hyper criminal insidiousness. Excuse me. Which, in other words, we need more. We need a hyperculture, a name. You know, new. There's a reason we need swears. There's a psychopath. There's psychopath uses of calmness that are simultaneously as roles with the aggression and the nature and regarding the nature of debate, using what appears to be debatable to get over on what is not debatable. All exceptions in exception nature come with demonstration slash S of the same thing. Slash S. I tell it best in many ways, vaccine. Before the World Trade Center attack, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, his lawyer, that's Robert Luskin, his lawyer, Robert Chevalier, and his co-defendant's lawyer. And no, he was directed by the judge, by Judge Nations or Judge Winters, I forgot the name, in a case, in a decision which is recorded. So they've been lying about things that are recorded too with the news relative to where and to how there are other countries involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, involved with people on off Fox Connecticut News in the buildings next to them, involved with a whole bunch of people. That's in Hartford, Connecticut. Those are people intercities, Connecticut, who have been on off campuses and along roads and routes. They'll take their picture next to someone walking next to you. They make fake exceptions of people knowing each other, people that don't know each other at all, too. His name was repeated to me by a Mark Violet, who was all. They made fake exceptions of me knowing him, but he repeated Joshua Julian's name to me, who's one of the people I recorded involved, not trying to, on the social media of the principal child offenders campus, being having been forced. These are also black and white female judges involved with Detective Samuda and others with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with the family members of deans and judges in their associations with people on off the state Connecticut corrections offices and judicial offices in the capital. There are collusions with this, increasingly with people who went to my grammar school that I never had conversations with, including adults putting fake things in databases. And then some of those kids, they plant them at the schools. Now, so for example, in some of my videos, I mentioned Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel and his sources. And so, and one of the things they do too is compare. Because at A through Z, where a human fact achieving nature breaching method, nature shows us a human fact achieving nature breaching method is one of the things true always that slavery was about. A human fact achieving nature breaching method. I'm not a lawyer. We can go further and discern. Nature shows us that it was a predicate action with facts delivery system method. Yeah, we can go further. I'm not a lawyer. We can go further and discern that it was the difference between that or criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method with treatments of positive and negative exclusion relative to where and to how other things, others ourselves, were and are being blamed for where and how that human fact human nature breaching method is a scientific value communicated by our founders and by the founders of other countries. we must read, we must show each other how to read with the species body system abridged at A through Z reads. Even though it is distinctly how A through Z are hurt by this, it is also non-distinctly. It is also right where there are wars manifest and other things manifest, is where we put down the platform for a temporary / lasting nature of industry and really retelling of history by the principles led by the hyper principle that are generating them. It is the one identity distinct a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. I started calling it a hyper simultaneous nature long before I heard of a hypersonic missile. We have to make hyper positives out of negatives. They have long had one of the worst things that leads to wars are the silences, even with peaceful nuclear energy. The suburbs, before America's founders were born, there were houses already designed And the torture, extortion, slavery laws were that if anyone was found out to be speaking about building houses outside of internationally monitored conversations, that person, everyone around them was hurt, tortured, killed, etc., made example of. And such had been sustained since semi-ancient times, since before modern religious messengers were born, which is more probably. And besides nature being about that, they're also about this with cipher. In other words, relative to where and how everyone's not leaving what's not in the cipher. The beginning of the Old Testament says only defend right here, where the names of the people with the sciences will come together. And the part before it. See, this is about the parsing of the mind. And this is about the identity the sciences share. By, by that hyper invisible but still discernible identity that has totally different species bodies. Even insects have quality aspects, nature, consciousness. Distinct but non-distinct, simultaneous, but also for that which is further hyper-simultaneous. We humanity did not invent, and the other species did not invent where and how all these species have quality aspects in nature, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous slash hyper-simultaneous slash because with nature and how and why it shows us. In other words, the difference between criminal insidiousness, natures of truths, for example, uses of truth, uses of motivations, of relativity with logic and reason. This breaching method knew that would have to hide behind what appears to be our ways, other motivations, natures, needs, interests, and layers of impositions upon sensibility relevant again to where and to how we have all natures of calmness posture and all natures of aggression postures by the media, distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly from the interbranch and from the intelligence tied to them. They have and have had roles of predicate acts for facts methods, criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents, roles with uses of social media in the narratives with people where there's a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Forgiveness was because they knew this breaching method knew everyone, including the police, are going to use and courts, and the difference of people that they're going to use the right to lie as a summary of laws, where those summaries of those laws are originally instilled. We have means to discern by nature itself. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police form. There are criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Connecticut to branch switches names and sequences. Interstates, the courts have self-value rules with sequence shifts. There's a certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Excuse me, at each age and nature of campus. Where and how there is something with all location slash S that never left, that no one wanted collusions with. It made exceptions and made justifications of roles with those exceptions and employments of them to her and help as collusions to keep other things other than yourselves blamed more and more correctly for which so for what things blamed that should have been blamed in the breaching method. Nature's still showing us to blame a human fact treatment nature breaching method. So countries don't know how to use each other's names. There are hundreds of countries at once, individually grouped and together. They don't know how to speak about the groupings. Psychiatry has been one of the things that has kept all unities of humanity and has kept all individual differences. They have roles with badges, ones who are doctors of psychiatry, who have badges, who have roles originally still fabricating transcripts, right where and how they have remote possession of countries' identities individually grouped and together. That is one of the things that is relative to where and to how people want to have debates about religions when both the Old Testament and the Quran say only defend right here. And it puts the individual obligated to attend with a quality of factual nature that shows that the people countering what they're calling extreme Islam and extremism, the people countering it, and those people are in collusion slash S with differences brackets, with uses of knowledge of good and evil, which is after the part. For example, where it says only in the Old Testament, only defend here. But in other words, using knowledge of good and evil. Oh, I know the most about the back of the Old Testament. It doesn't say you have to know that. You only have to know that part about the quality of diffusion with the parsing of consciousness, where and how that identity, like all identities, have relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, slash hyper simultaneously. Again, this is what we discern when we discern. We have two eyes. Other species bodies have two eyes. And it's not per them or nor us. It's per a greater and more finite identity. To an extent we can discern. But to that extent we can discern, it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that too, simultaneously equally increasing. And relative slash hyperrelative as that part we can discern of itself, inseparable from and as the value of any subject individually grouped together. That's its volume science. That's why we are individual species bodies of individual bodies. All group differences come with demonstrations of the hyper individual. I mean, the hyper individual distinct identity of hyper simultaneous that we are hyper additionally from while how we are simultaneous nature slash S and not our species alone. And only alone our species bodies and the Earth's a special difference relative to where and to how nature communicates the answers and revelations with a special difference. But we have short words there for a bit. The identities of the sciences. This breaching method showed them how they had to hide their roles, self-valuing, predicate acts with facts, methods, clearer than day against each age of fact-keeping nature. They're doing it at every age and nature of campus. See, it's a distinct. So they're the same people who had this showed the identities of the law at countries A through Z, how to interpret their founders, and measures and maintain self-valued roles. Use it with the use slash S of what they said, leaving out what they declassified about that, leaving out what nature itself shows us about that. For example, leaving out the human fact keeping nature breaching method. Again, that which is one of the things true always that slavery was about. Vaccines, I teach those things, but law. So I was attached to fake words by the news and by interbranch at the same time as collusions with terrorists, a whole bunch of different countries, and retired and standing interbranch and intelligence tied to them. Wire crime acts and methods and mail crime acts and methods, falsified police reports, use slash S roles, times collusion slash S with multiple natures of distinct criminal enterprise is private and overt at the same time. Names next to body dumping spots. All this is brought up at the same time. Untimely death rolls with the borders. So this is not by accident. These are people hurting and helping simultaneously. The people, the Democratic team or the Republican team, because that difference too was is used to hide behind. You think someone could speak about those differences, correct? Until they have with those two colors. Nature's showing us we have the same color eyes in different color eyes at the same time. Nature's teaching us about difference as that difference, as that distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. It is showing us simultaneously too. There are exceptions, and like some people have the same color eyes too, with the exceptions part. But when it comes down to it, even that's not the same. Hyper-additional nature is being made. That's is being demonstrated to us. How to answer our question, where everything came from, where it goes, what to do right now.